Golf is full of distractions. There are the obvious ones, like people talking or a bug landing on your ball during your swing or a rules official telling your group that it's on the clock. But then there's the not so obvious ones, like distracting thoughts, thinking about past and future, other people's opinions, or what you might shoot. In this episode, I want to go through 2 scientifically proven ways to improve your attention span, but also to give you tools on the course to use so that you can focus for an entire round of golf, not just part of one. And if you're focused for an entire round of golf, you give yourself the best chance to play well. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mental Golf Show, where we discuss all things golf psychology to help avid golfers improve their game. As always, I'm your host, Josh Nichols. I've been a golf psychology coach for over 5 years. I've been playing competitive amateur golf for over 20 years, where most notably I made it to the finals of the 2017 U.S. Mid-Amateur. And in that tournament, I played 10 rounds in 8 days, and those were not just any rounds of golf. They were high-intensity, high-pressure USGA championship rounds, which required a lot of focus. So I want to draw on some of that experience, as well as some of the things that I've learned since then to help you focus for an entire round of golf and be able to play better. And the fact that you're here means that you're just one in 1,000 golfers that are actively working on their mental game. So hats off to you. All right, let's get into it. In 2013, the USGA did a study on pace of play. They found that weekday rounds took about 4 hours on average, and weekend rounds took about 4.5 hours on average. And I've heard that has even increased since then due to the influx of new players during COVID. But the thing that's crazy is while rounds of golf are getting longer, our attention spans are getting shorter. Studies show that the average attention span of an adult trying to do one task is about 47 seconds. That's how long we can focus on one individual thing. So how can we expect to focus for an entire 4 to 5 hour round of golf? We live in a distracted time, and most often we can get what we want instantly, right? You're scrolling, you don't like something, you just scroll to the next thing. You can know within 1 or 2 seconds whether or not this is something you like. And heck, a lot of people won't make it 30 seconds into this video before clicking off to something else. Something I often say is everything is training. Everything that you do trains your brain in some way to either do that thing more or do that thing less. When we do things that don't require a very long attention span, and we fuel that short attention span, we train our brains to have a shorter and shorter length of focus. And we're training ourselves to need more and more of those quick, easy dopamine hits to get more and more satisfied. The more we get, the more we need. So combine that with the length of round of golf getting longer and longer, more and more people on the golf course slowing things down. This is obviously a really tough combo. So why is focus important in the first place? Being focused helps you be present, and being present is important to playing well. And in case you need some convincing on this, think of these 2 scenarios. In one of the scenarios, you're hitting a golf shot, you are focused on the strategy of what you want to do, you are focused on the motion that you have to do to hit a good one, and you're intensely focused on the task at hand. And in the other scenario, you're also about to hit a golf shot, but instead you are focusing on past shots, future shots, other people's opinions, and maybe even how quickly you need to get the shot over with so you can get over to the beverage cart. So which of these 2 will give you a better chance to hit a good one? Hopefully this line of questioning is pretty obvious to you. And another thing working against us, in addition to our attention spans getting shorter, is something called decision fatigue. What's decision fatigue? Well, you can think about it like this. Every day when you wake up, your decision-making meter starts at 100%, but every decision we make decreases that meter. Something like deciding between 3-wood or driver on a wide open par 5. That's a pretty easy decision, so it decreases your decision-making meter only just a little. But decisions with more gray area, like choosing between 3 wedges and what trajectory you want to hit the pitch shot or chip shot, and what the slope of the green is, what the lie is, and how far you need to land it to carry the ridge, but not carry it too far so you don't roll off the back into a hazard. Those decisions are a little bit heavier, and each time you have to make one of those decisions, it decreases your decision-making meter a lot. And on top of that, with the decision-making meter, it gets lower and lower by default just as you go through the day. You know, you get physically fatigued, you get malnourished, dehydrated. Any of these things can make your decision-making meter take a hit. All of these things will hurt our ability to focus, and incidentally, all of these things are factors that can happen during a round of golf. So your focus gets lower and lower the deeper you get into the round, aka your focus meter is lower on hole 18 than it was on hole 1. So these are the kind of built-in focus depleting things that just come with a round of golf. But I want to talk about a different type of distraction, something that I call intentional distraction, where you're actually distracting yourself on purpose. And you might have even come across this. There's a proliferation of mental game advice out there that says if you're having negative thoughts or you're feeling pressure or you're feeling nervous or you're uncomfortable in some way, you just need to distract yourself from those thoughts and replace it with a different thought. And this distraction will help alleviate those uncomfortable feelings. And I can see where this advice is coming from. You know, I have a thought, I don't like this thought, so let's inject another thought on top of it so that I don't have to think about that other thought. It sounds like it would work, but I like what Raymond Pryor says in his book, Golf Beneath the Surface. And yes, I talk about this book all the time because it's so good. You should pick it up. He says on page 88, distraction is just another way of saying avoidance. And trying to avoid our inner experience, especially unpleasant thoughts and feelings, doesn't work and usually makes things worse. So those techniques that some might suggest, like singing a song in your head or thinking happy thoughts or counting backwards from 100, they sound like they would work, but they actually cause more problems than they solve. Because you're essentially telling yourself that your thoughts are bad and I need to avoid these negative thoughts, which creates kind of this internal battle of you against your own thinking. So now you've got the thoughts of trying to hit a good shot and the thoughts of being nervous and Wonderwall by Oasis stuck in your head. So those intentional distractions are really just distractions, not exactly a great strategy to rely on. So our challenge is set up for us. Our attention spans are getting shorter, but we actually need longer attention spans to play a round of golf. And rounds of golf have many of the factors that decrease our ability to focus. And focus is important because being mentally present on the shot is important. And of course, distractions make it harder to focus. They don't help us focus more. So how can we fight this battle? Well, we're going to go through 2 ways that you can face this challenge and improve your ability to focus for an entire round of golf. We've got one off-course exercise and one on-course exercise. So let's start with the off-course exercise. The off-course exercise is meditation. Now, before you click away or write me off completely, there are thousands of studies on the benefits of meditation, and improving our ability to focus is just one of those many benefits. And the actual exercise of a basic meditation makes this really clear. Usually goes like you sitting in a non-distracting environment, you close your eyes, you are focused on your breath, your mind wanders away from your breath, aka you get distracted, you notice the distraction, and then you come back to your breath. So that act of noticing the distraction, then coming back to your focus point, trains that focus muscle. And over time, we can get better and better at holding our attention on one single thing. The value of this for golf is pretty obvious. And in golf, you really only need to focus for about 2 minutes at a time. But again, with that depleting decision-making focus meter, that 2 minutes gets pretty tough by the end of the round. And during those 2 minutes, our brains have ample time to wander off into the past or the future, start to worry about other things, start to get bogged down with thoughts of technique and mechanical thoughts. The 2 minutes where you're trying to hit a golf shot are usually really quiet and all the attention is on you. So there's a void there that your brain will try to fill with more thoughts. So what's really important is we're not trying to block out those thoughts or, like we've talked about, distract ourselves from those thoughts. We are trying to notice those thoughts, let them be there, and focus on what we're trying to do anyway. And the research shows that doing meditation like we're describing actually improves the physical structure of our brain to be able to focus on the thing that we want to focus on. So here's a really simple meditation that you could start doing right now or today or tomorrow morning. You find a non-distracting environment, you sit down, you close your eyes, you bring your attention to your breath, and you're just focusing on your breath. You notice your mind wanders away from your breath. That's going to happen. You are cool with it, right? You're not mad or forcing your attention back. You notice it with acceptance, then you bring your attention back to your breath. And you do that over and over for as long as you need, for about 5 to 10 minutes. And you do that for a month. Come back to this and see how you feel. So that's our off-course exercise. Meditating daily for a month and then ongoing. And you'll start to see the benefits of meditation and actually kind of using meditation throughout your round of golf to bring you from wherever your mind is back to the present. All right, it is the next day. Yesterday got a little crazy, so I had to stop, but here we are. So speaking of an off-course exercise, I want to tell you about a training aid that I actually think helps with focus. It's called the Div Board. Now, I don't know if you've seen this thing around, but I own a Div Board, and it is easily my favorite training aid that I've ever had. And I'm very picky about training aids. I don't have many, so that's saying a lot. So what is a Div Board? What does it do? So when you're using a Div Board, you put your golf ball on the yellow circle right in the middle. When you hit your ball, you can see exactly where the club started making ground contact. You can see whether or not you hit it thin or heavy, but based on the depth and the width of the divot. And then you can see the path of the divot to see, okay, was I out to in? Was I in to out? It's just really awesome instant feedback. And it also feels really good. It's got what they call a natural turf feel. It just has a nice thickness to it it feels like actual turf. It really does. And some people have a problem with maybe the thickness of it. I've gotten this question a few times. Isn't that too high off the ground? Won't that mess up my, low point control or whatever? Just get a doormat or something, stand on the doormat. I've been doing that for years now of hitting in my backyard. I don't want to stand on dirt, so I'll put down a doormat, and that puts me about the height of the Div Board. So that's an easy fix. And how the Div Board helps your focus is the instant feedback that you get can be challenging because it shows you the error that you just made very, very quickly. So the next shot you have to work on adapting and changing to not make the same error. And that requires a lot of focus. You have to experience the error, you have to make an adaptation to change, and then you have to hit the next shot. And that process, to be present on hitting the next shot well, is challenging. So I think the Div Board is a great physical and mental training aid. And that's why I love it so much. Oh, and they actually just launched their whole turf mat. So you can have an integrated Div Board into a turf mat. You get that whole system of, hitting off a tee, hitting off fairway grass, and hitting off a Div Board all in one thing. So that thing's awesome. So you can get anything on the Div Board website at 10% off by going to divotboard.com/mentalgolfshow and use the code mentalgolf10 at checkout, and you'll get 10% off anything in the store. Yes, you can get that discount elsewhere. You could get that discount by signing up to their email newsletter or whatever. But if you use my link and use my discount code, you get the discount and you support me and what I'm doing. So if that's important to you, that'd be cool to do. So I'll have the link to do that and the code in the show notes. And many thanks to the Div Board for partnering with the Mental Golf Show. Thank you. All right, now let's get into our on-course exercise to train your focus. Our on-course exercise is something called habit mapping. This is something I first heard from reading a book or a couple books by neuroscientist and author Judson Brewer. The books are The Craving Mind and Unwinding Anxiety. They're awesome books. I read them years back. I'd love to read them again. They just go through a really, really good process of unhelpful habits that you want to change, and here's how to change them. So we're going to go through that process here. So what we're going to do is we're going to track our common habit loops that we get into, and those habit loops are made up of a trigger, the behavior, and a reward for the behavior. And this is the cycle that we go through that creates habits. The trigger is like the environmental cue. It's like the thing that happens that triggers the habit. So a trigger could be like you make a birdie and suddenly you realize you've got a good round going. And the behavior as a result of the trigger is the actual habit that you're doing. So that could be something like you're starting to count your score, you're starting to do the math of what you need to how you need to finish this round, thinking ahead to future holes. And the reward is basically the result you get from doing the habit, or the result you think you're getting from doing the habit. And in our example here of trying to finish off a good round, the habit of kind of fast forwarding into the future, going ahead and counting your score, that can feel like you're doing something to make a good score happen. So you get that feeling of a reward from doing that habit because you feel like you're doing something. It feels productive. But as is the main topic of this episode, fast forwarding into the future is actually a distraction, right? It actually takes your focus away from the present. So even though it feels like we're doing something, it's actually an unproductive habit that we're going to want to change. So in our habit mapping, we need to catch the trigger that leads to the behavior. Then we need to, recognize the behavior that it's making us do. And then the reward or the result or the thing we think we're getting from doing this habit, we have to recognize that cycle. So what are some common triggers that could cause distraction, that could make us lose focus? Things like sights and noises and other things happening in the physical world, those can be distracting. Those are kind of overt distractions, very obvious distractions. But the one that we're going to be more on the lookout for are covert distractions, things like thoughts, things like feelings and emotions, thinking ahead about your score, thinking about other people's opinions, feeling anxious, those kind of thoughts that distract us from what we're trying to do. So these can all serve as triggers. And for habit mapping purposes, you'll have to recognize what triggers you. What situation do you get in that triggers distraction or that causes you to lose focus? But then why do we get distracted? We know that being distracted is not helpful. We know that focusing on the present and focusing on the shot, one shot at a time, we know that's helpful. So then why don't we do it all the time? Well, because of the reward or the result or what we think we're getting by being distracted, by thinking ahead to the future, by worrying about technique, by counting my score, by worrying about other people's opinions. We think we're getting something good from that behavior, so that's why we do it. And the tough thing here is being distracted isn't always bad. So if you're about to step out onto a busy street, you're focused on walking, but a car horn will distract you, quote unquote, distract you from what you're doing. And that's a good distraction. That's an overt distraction that brings your attention away from what you're doing and helps you survive, right? That's a good distraction. Or on the golf course, you're about to hit a shot and someone yells 4 from the tee box over. You're going to want to be distracted by that, right? You're going to want to duck for cover. And so that's a good distraction away from what you're doing. So those distractions can be helpful in life or death situations, but typically the golf course is not a life or death situation. So we have to recognize that being distracted is not all that helpful, even though it feels helpful. That's where that reward result, what I feel like I'm getting from doing this behavior, comes from. So why is it rewarding to do these kind of thoughts? Why do we continue to be anxious or think about other people's opinions? Why do we do those things even though we know they're not helpful? And what I've noticed about myself and why I do this is it makes me feel like I'm doing something about the thing that could happen in the future. I've done a couple of public speeches before, kind of about mental game, golf psychology stuff, and I get anxious about those upcoming speeches. And the anxiety feels like I'm doing something about the thing I'm afraid of. It feels like if I were to just let the thing come on its own time, I wouldn't be doing enough. I wouldn't be caring enough. So that anxiety feels like I'm doing something. So it feels rewarding to be anxious. But it's not actually doing anything other than making the present less enjoyable and less productive. The anxiety is distracting me from preparing for the speech that I'm worried about. So we've got our distractions, we got our behaviors that we don't want to do, and we kind of understand what triggers and behaviors and rewards and that whole cycle is. So how can this habit mapping help us focus more on the course? What is it? How can it help us do it better? So when we're on the course and we're in that situation that triggers us, this is when we have to habit map. So we first have to catch the trigger. Maybe it's that birdie on your way to possibly breaking 80 for the first time, or it's the tight par 4, or it's the people watching you on the first tee, whatever that distracting trigger is for you. And then the next step is the behavior itself. It's the It's the unhelpful habit that we're wanting to change. So maybe you notice the urge for your mind to jump into the future, or you notice your mind to want to worry about what other people are thinking. So for purpose of this exercise, I want to run it like an experiment. I want you to actually let yourself get distracted, which might be hard because you're paying attention to it now, but I want you to actually get distracted because of our third step of our habit mapping. The trigger behavior reward, we have to pay attention to the reward that we're getting from doing the behavior, from being distracted. What are we actually getting from being distracted? So the key difference here is that we are paying attention to what we think we're getting by being distracted. It's helping us play better. It's making a good score happen. It's making sure that we know that other people are thinking good things about us so that we're going to act different and blah, blah, blah. We have to see the difference between what we think we're getting and what we're actually getting by being distracted. By showing your brain what you're actually getting by being distracted, by doing the unproductive habit, you disenchant yourself from wanting to do that behavior. You show your brain, this is an unhelpful behavior. Look, I'm paying attention to how unhelpful it is in the moment. I'm not just thinking about it after the round. Wow, why do I always do that in that situation? I'm in the situation paying attention to how unhelpful it is right now and how unhelpful it feels, how crappy it feels to worry about other people's opinions or to be fast forwarding into the future or to be anxious about something or worried about hitting it out of bounds. Those habits and behaviors feel crappy. And the research shows that doing this kind of process of, noticing the trigger, paying attention to the behavior that you want to do as a result of that trigger, and then most importantly, paying attention to what you actually get from doing that behavior. The research shows that that is basically the number one way to change habits, as opposed to something like hardcore willpower, cold turkey. And that works for some people of, I'm just going to not do it ever again. But that's really challenging for mental habits. I'm never going to be anxious again. That's hard to just willpower yourself into never being anxious. You have to say, I'm going to actually pay attention to how bad it feels to be anxious. I don't like being anxious. So when I'm in the moment that leads to anxiety, I'm going to actually pay attention to it and feel how bad it is to feel anxious, which shows my brain over time, wait, I don't like doing that. Why am I doing that? That doesn't feel good. So your brain lowers that behavior into its go-to responses, right? It lowers it down. I'm not going to go to that as our first response because of how crappy it feels. I don't want to do something that feels crappy all the time. So I've done this habit mapping exercise for myself, and I've given it to some of my players that I work with. It's really, really informative. It's almost liberating. You almost feel like you're like lucid in a dream. The dream is I'm going through this same old cycle that I always go through, but instead I'm in it and I'm present in it. I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, to where my mind is going, where my brain wants to take me. And it's true. It really shows you, man, I feel so anxious and it feels so bad to feel anxious. So I just don't want to feel that way anymore. So the next time you're in the situation, there's that urge to go into anxiety, but you're like, aha, here I go again. I don't want to, right? It doesn't feel as good. I don't want to do the thing that doesn't feel as good. And over time, the desire to be anxious, the desire to do the distracting thing gets less and less and less. And again, I'll point you to Dr. Judson Brewer's books, The Craving Mind, Unwinding Anxiety. No, they're not golf specific, but psychology is not golf specific. Golf is just one thing we do with our psychology. So learning about your psychology and learning why you do the things that you do and how to change the things that you don't want to do, that's really important. So we've got our two-pronged plan for staying focused for an entire round of golf. First, we have to train our ability to be focused in the first place. We have to extend our attention span, and that is through our off-course exercise of meditation. And then we have to change the unhelpful behavior of being distracted, of habitually being distracted, and that's through our on-course exercise of habit mapping. Now, I don't know if you expected me to say something like, just focus, right? Just willpower yourself to stay focused, or just, snap a rubber band on your wrist every time you get distracted. And those things just don't work because they actually set up that situation where you start to undermine your own thinking. You start to just fight yourself all day. So we don't want to fight ourselves. We want to pay attention to what we're doing with acceptance, mindfully, non-judgmentally. Pay attention to what you're doing and pay attention to how bad it feels to be anxious, how bad it feels to do the distracting behavior. That's how we can actually change an unhelpful habit. So the combination of these two, of the off-course meditation and the on-course habit mapping, these two set you up to have the actual skills and the actual tools to change. They actually build your mental strength to be able to do it on your own instead of giving you a quick fix. I'm not interested in giving you a quick fix. So this will help you stay more focused throughout an entire round, be more present, which gives you the best chance to play your best. So if you like this episode, you'd probably also like another episode of the Mental Golf Show. It's titled How to Quickly Refocus on the Course. That's obviously heavily related to this. So the link to check that one out will be in the show notes. And if you have questions or comments about this topic or any other topic, or working with me one-on-one on your own golf psychology, you can send me an email to josh@joshnicholsgolf.com. You could head to my website, joshnicholsgolf.com. You could follow me on Twitter or X or Instagram at Josh Luke Nichols. And I also want to point you to a really cool free resource called the Mental Game Assessment. It takes about 15 minutes. It's like 100 statements that you answer 1 to 5, and you will get a report that gives you your mental strengths and your areas in most need of improvement. It's the same resource that I use with my clients when, we'll go through these statements and actually learn, okay, what are you thinking when you're on the course? What are you thinking about golf as a whole? So it's a really important resource to me, so I think it could be valuable to you. So if you're interested in the mental game assessment or getting a Div Board 10% off, the links will be in the show notes of this episode. All right, thanks again for listening to the Mental Golf Show, and thank you for your interest in golf psychology. I'm Josh Nichols, and I will catch you guys next time. Play freely, everybody.